They called it the mission to civilize. A noble phrase, wasn't it? France, the land of liberty, equality, fraternity, venturing out into the world, supposedly to share the light of its culture and ideals. But if you peel back that beautiful veneer, you'll find a story that isn't about light, but about shadow, a history written not in ink, but in the blood of millions. This is the story of the French colonial empire, an empire built on a brutal contradiction. Let's begin where the story so often does, in the Caribbean. Saint-Domingue, what we now know as Haiti, was the jewel in France's colonial crown. It was the world's leading producer of sugar and coffee, and it made France incredibly wealthy. But this wealth was generated by one of the most brutal systems of chattel slavery ever devised. Hundreds of thousands of enslaved Africans were worked to death in the fields. The average lifespan for an enslaved person arriving in Saint-Domingue was terrifyingly short. The system was designed to extract maximum labor through maximum cruelty. But the human spirit can only be crushed for so long. In 1791, inspired by the very French Revolution that proclaimed the rights of man, the enslaved people of Saint-Domingue rose up. Led by figures like Toussaint Louverture and later Jean-Jacques Dessalines, they fought a long, bloody war for their freedom. Napoleon Bonaparte, betraying the revolution's ideals, sent a massive army to crush the rebellion and reinstate slavery. He failed. In 1804, Haiti declared its independence, becoming the world's first free black republic. But France's retribution was swift and cruel. It wasn't with armies this time, but with economics. In 1825, French warships blockaded Haiti, threatening to invade and re-enslave the population unless Haiti paid an exorbitant indemnity. This payment was supposedly to compensate the former French slaveholders for their lost property, which of course were the free people of Haiti themselves. The debt was astronomical 150 million gold francs. Haiti was forced to take out loans from French banks to begin paying it, shackling its economy for over a century. This single act crippled the young nation's development, a burden it still feels to this day. It's a chilling example of how colonialism continues to inflict damage long after the flags come down. Now, let's cross the Atlantic to Africa, where France's civilizing mission took a different, but no less violent form. The conquest of Algeria, beginning in 1830, was a 40-year saga of pure brutality. French generals practiced a scorched earth policy they called enfumade when Algerian resistance fighters and their families took refuge in caves. French soldiers would light massive fires at the entrances, suffocating thousands of men, women, and children inside. Entire villages were wiped out. The population of Algeria plummeted by nearly a third during the first few decades of French rule due to war, famine, and disease. France's goal was to turn Algeria not just into a colony, but into an extension of France itself. European settlers, known as Pieds Noirs, were given the best land. while the indigenous Algerian population was dispossessed and reduced to second-class citizens in their own homeland. This deep-seated inequality and violent suppression eventually led to the brutal Algerian War of Independence from 1954 to 1962, a conflict marked by widespread torture and massacres on both sides, which left scars that have yet to fully heal. The story repeats itself across West Africa and Central Africa. To build railways like the Congo-Ocean Line, the French administration relied on a system of forced labor that was slavery in all but name. African men were conscripted from their villages and forced to work in horrific conditions. The death toll was staggering. It's estimated that for every kilometer of track laid, dozens of African workers lost their lives to exhaustion, malnutrition, and disease. This wasn't about building infrastructure for the benefit of the local people. It was about extracting resources like rubber and timber as efficiently and cheaply as possible for the French market. Let's journey now to Southeast Asia, to a region the French called Indochina, comprising modern-day Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. The initial conquest in the mid-19th century was violent, but the system of control that followed was just as insidious. The French established monopolies on salt, alcohol, and opium. They actively encouraged opium consumption among the local population because it was a massive source of revenue for the colonial administration. They created a population dependent on a substance that dulled their senses and their will to resist, all while filling the colonial coffers. It was a cynical, destructive policy that put profit far above human well-being. Education was strictly controlled. While the French built some schools, the system was designed to create a small, French-speaking native elite to serve as low-level administrators, not to uplift the general population. The vast majority of people were kept illiterate. Any Vietnamese nationalist movements or calls for greater autonomy were ruthlessly crushed. Political prisoners were sent to penal colonies, like the infamous Can Aco prison, where they faced torture and brutal conditions. This suppression eventually fueled the rise of powerful nationalist and communist movements, leading to the First Indochina War, where France was ultimately defeated at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu in 1954, a stunning victory for the Vietnamese that inspired anti-colonial movements across the globe. And we cannot forget Madagascar, the great island off the coast of Africa. After conquering the island in 1895, France faced a massive popular uprising in 1947. The people of Madagascar promised greater freedom after fighting for France in World War II, rose up to demand independence. The French response was utterly devastating. The colonial army engaged in mass executions, torture, and psychological warfare. Entire villages suspected of supporting the rebellion were burned to the ground. In one notorious tactic, prisoners were thrown alive from airplanes to terrorize the population into submission. From the crushing debt imposed on Haiti to the mass suffocation in Algerian caves, the forced labor in the Congo, the state-sponsored opium trade in Vietnam, and the massacres in Madagascar. The pattern is undeniable. The mission to civilize was a facade. The reality was a mission of economic exploitation, racial subjugation, and violent domination. The wealth and grandeur of France were built on the backs and the graves of millions of colonized people. Understanding this history is not about assigning collective guilt to people in the present. It's about acknowledging the truth. It's about understanding the deep historical roots of many of the global inequalities and conflicts we see today. The legacy of colonialism is not confined to the history books. It lives on in the economic struggles of former colonies, in the political instability left behind, and in the ongoing debates about identity, migration, and reparations. To build a more just and equitable future, we must have the courage to face the darkest chapters of our past. The beautiful words of liberty and equality mean nothing if they are not applied to everyone. Thank you for joining me on this difficult but necessary journey through history. If you found this video insightful, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the stories that have shaped our world. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. See you next time.